Hello, hello. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Bjorn Thorlefsen, and I'm the head of research and insights at AMP, a global sonic branding agency, making sure that brands are using sound and music in the most beneficial way. Today we have Graham Sykes from Landor. Hi, Graham.
Hello.
We have Roberto Ramirez Lavarte from Bacardí.
Hello, everyone.
And April Quilly from Legacy Marketing.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm super excited to be talking about music, sound, alcohol, and how it all goes together like a good mix of cocktail. So on that note, maybe you can have a quick introduction. Graham, if you go first.
Yes, I'm Graham, ECD of Landor in London. We are responsible for building and creating transformative brands across the entire experience ecosystem. So very au fait with the power of how you can build brands to touch the senses and create memorability, and why I'm super excited to be here and talk about the power of music in association with alcohol.
And Roberto, what is your background?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Roberto Ramirez. I'm the Global SVP for Bacardí Rums. And I have been working in marketing for the last 25 years, and most of it in beverages, but also I had the privilege to work in Mastercard. So I have been in companies like Coca-Cola, Heineken, Cuervo, Mastercard, and obviously Bacardí. So very excited to be here. The relevance of music, I think nowadays, and Sonic is incredible. And I think we have a huge challenge moving forward.
And April.
Hi, everybody. I'm April Quealy, head of creative at Legacy Marketing, formerly of Beam Suntory. So I've spent the last good chunk of my career working across global brands, lots of spirits, and creating really authentic, powerful, transformative experiences for consumers is what we're here to talk about today.
Great. And on that note, I would like to throw you into the deep end by asking you a question that you were not expecting. What is your favorite cocktail?
Oh, mine? Oh, well, it depends on the occasion. You know, just like with anything, it is a very occasion-based moment for me. So I can go everything from a beautiful pour of a Japanese whiskey to a glass of champagne. From a cocktail perspective, I think I'm going to just go with an old-fashioned.
Excellent choice. And how about you, Graham?
There's only really one for me, dirty martini.
Dirty rather than filthy?
Yeah.
And Roberto?
Well, I may say I have two. I agree that it depends on the occasion. The first one is a Bacardí 8 on the rocks, which is a Bacardí which is aged at least 8 years. Amazing. And the other one is a Bacardí Mojito, traditional cocktail, but classic cocktails are always kind of good, and I love it.
Of course, very smooth. And now let's talk about music. So alcohol and music have gone hand in hand for, thousands of years. Is the combination coded in the human experience? Who knows? But is there something innate or almost primal about marrying sound and spirits? Feel free to answer whoever has something to say about it.
I can go first if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. Music is key. And actually, when I look, for example, on our brand, music is our core pillar in culture and the way in which we really engage with people. Music has been always embedded in our brand DNA. And we're talking about a brand that is more than 160 years old. So somehow music has become our fountain of youth. It helps us to connect with generations, bring new consumers into the brand. And I think that's the reason why it remains so fundamental to our core. And as I mentioned, it's our part of our really cultural platform. And also connects very well with our brand because Bacardí rum is a spirit that makes you move. It's very funny because we really love to say that you never drink a mojito sitting down. Really, it makes you move. It really, want to stand up. And there's something about a movement. There's something that it connects very well between rum and movement and dance. And that's actually why we have developed our platform, Do What Moves You. which at the end connects, has an emotional and a rational connection with the consumer. This is a platform that we have run for the last 8 years, and it's a way to continue celebrating movement, freedom of expression, and the joy, obviously, of drinking rum. So I literally see that connection very strong, and has been in the past, is in the present, and will be in the future.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. I think that there's there's an innate sort of quality to the mixing of food, drink, music, ceremony, ritual that from a brand perspective or from an audience perspective, it actually transcends all cultures, all geographies, all time, and is as old as the hills in reference. And I think that's what makes it such an important and kind of special topic to discuss, and something that we get very excited about working with, because as soon as you start to kind of take those ritualistic moments and celebrate them and allow brands and audiences to convalesce around them, I think you can create some really powerful memories. So I do think it is ingrained in us, and we're kind of born with this sort of appetite for all the senses to be played with during these moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Graham. It's, sound really is that key to immersion. We get lost in a song, we get transported by a playlist. A good playlist can take a regular drive and turn it into a road trip or a journey, right? It's the soundtrack for every one of our experiences. So even down to, we use white noise and rainfall and thunderstorm sounds to fall asleep or to find that like state of peace. So I think, in my opinion, your curated playlist says as much about you as your curated bar card, right? Like what you drink, what you choose. Back to the question you just asked us, Bjorn. It really helps to identify you and give those signals of who you are, what you like, and how you're feeling in that moment.
Yeah, I think this leads to my next question. Because the alcohol industry tends to license a lot of pop tracks. Does this come from a desire to appear in pop culture, despite the expensive nature of the licensing? And as a brand and agency leaders, are you seeing the topic of having your own brand sound be coming up in your conversations?
I completely sort of appreciate and understand why brands would want some, instant kudos, some call points by association. It helps you kind of go and meet particular target audiences in a really evocative and emotive way. It can help modernize. I think where I kind of think about the downsides of some of this is audiences change, and so does music very quickly. And the brands that we try and build, the memorability we try and build has to transcend what might be popular or for this moment or popular next week or the year after. So I do think whatever you're trying to create, be that an advert or be that a sonic signature, there's a demand to make sure you look at that through the brand lens, and you really do consider why it's right, why it's appropriate, why it stands for the things that you want to stand for in the mind's eye of your audience.
Yeah, and I think, adding to that, I think there's multiple reasons of why we're doing that connection. The first one, we need to recognize that consumers are really not paying attention to really a lot of the things that the brands are doing. They are not expecting something for the brands. On the other hand, they are also, receiving so many messages on a daily basis that it's very hard to connect with them. And music and sound somehow connects in a linear way with them and really evokes more emotions sometimes than even visual cues. Actually, they say that consumers really, or human beings, are usually, focused in one sound, while they can focus in multiple visual cues, like, having multiple screens at the same time, or really focus to a single message of sound. So I think it's very relevant that as a brand, we really connect with them at that level. And therefore, that's why, from the brand perspective, we try to connect with them with the right music and with the right artist. I think also needs to be authentic. Somehow it needs to be, there's a relationship between the brand essence and the music and the sounds that you are developing to ensure that connection really is relevant for the consumers and relevant for the brand. In our case, for example, we use a filter that we call the Sound of Rum, which is something upbeat, vibrant, Latin Caribbean, warm, and as the brand, just fun. So whether it's with emerging artists or highly established ones, We really want them to feel natural connected to our brand and what we stand for. And that's why this connection of the values of the brand and the artist are so important.
Absolutely. And I think Bacardí has done this really well, because even though you don't have a sonic identity or a holistic, sonic identity, you have a strategic thought of who you are partnering with, and you've done that really well. But I still personally believe that there's an opportunity to drive pop culture by having a sonic identity, and then allowing these artists to use the identity to create something new. But April, what have you seen when it comes to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we target Gen Z consumers more, there's no one that demands authenticity more than that demographic, right? We have to really look through their lens. Music can also be extraordinarily polarizing, right? You have the wrong track and you could lose a huge section of your audience because they identify so closely with that artist or don't identify, right? They don't connect. And it is a very slippery slope to put all of your bets on one particular song. So I think, to Roberto's point, having that breadth of options that live in a genre but don't put everything on one track or one artist really helps to broaden the pool a little bit and send that message out to more people and connect. For people that are sound sensitive, and there's a lot of us out there, the wrong sound, the wrong track, the wrong just something can really be a turnoff. So when you're thinking about an intimate moment like drinking and a drinking occasion, you want to make sure that you've got that breadth so that it appeals to enough people and still feels right for the brand.
And with that in mind, with excluding Bacardí, what alcohol brand comes to mind when you think of music and sound in general? Is there anyone?
I mean, I go right to tequila. Again, very similar to the Bacardí approach. With it has a kind of a heritage quality to it, but it's modern, so it brings you into this contemporary space that also harkens back to Mexico and the roots in a lot of places, but brings it into a more of a modern space. So I think you could look at a lot of different tequila brands to see success there.
Absolutely. It's easier to tie tequila or rum to music than, for example, the national drink of Iceland, which is called Black Death. What would be the music of that other than, black metal?
That's a good.
But the sound of Iceland is so distinct. It feels like it would be so, easy to tell that story through an audio narrative. There's nothing like the sound of Iceland. So it could transport you to the space and place.
I think on that point, that was when we were first looking at this question, that was something that I came to quite quickly. Was I struggled to recall many tracks, but I recalled, the Budweiser moment from the late 90s, the Coors Light ice cracking, the Gordon's gin and tonic sort of ice and glass chink. So there's these very sort of ritualistic sonic signatures that live alongside the musical creation, that become an even more instant sort of memory maker, if you like. And I think the power of combining those with, sonic themes and music language is something that's really progressing quite rapidly at the moment.
Yeah, I think that idea of almost that outside of music, that ASMR of drinks, right? It's such a recognizable audio narrative. You hear the ice clinking in glasses, and it gives you this sense of irreverence or whimsy. You hear a cold beer cracking open, the bottle pop topping or the can, and it brings cues refreshment. As we're working through content for different spirits brands or different drinks moments, you really want to lean into those almost intangible qualities to signal refreshment or relaxation or irreverence by leaning into those specific those audio cues.
I fully agree, and I think to the question, I think as an industry we have a huge challenge to really build that connection between Sonic and the brands. And because I think right now there's no a clear one that is distinguished among the others. And I think we have been focusing as an industry a lot in visual cues, a lot in the names of our brands, the logo of our brands, but not necessarily in those sonic cues that are as relevant or even more relevant to really connect in those different occasions and with those emotions as April was describing. So I think there's a huge opportunity across the board. When I think also in those brands that have been doing it well, probably I go, as Graham was saying, more to the past, connected to jingles, which is a good way to connect with consumers. And I think there are so many famous jingles from different brands, but still feels limited to the potential that Sonic can have to really adapt, as you were describing, to geographies, to genres, to occasions, etc.
Yeah. It's interesting that you guys all mention, the sonic cues, the king of glasses, eyes, and so on. But unfortunately, that is something that you cannot copyright. You cannot really own it. It's more associated with the whole sector or specific alcohol type. But what we found during our investigation for Amplify is that there is one brand that we found that has a sonic identity, and that is Pilsner Urquell. But unfortunately, they only use it in 20% of their material. So even for the brand that has a sonic identity that is meant to be a holistic one, there is definitely room for improvement. On that note, let's go to questions that are directly pointed at you guys. First, Roberto. So Bacardí is no stranger to the power and impact of music, as you have already told us. As a brand that has, inked many successful partnerships with musicians, like including Camila Cabello, Boy Wonder, Major Lazer, and Swiss Beats, to name just few. How do you see artists and brands collaborating sonically in the future, and how might AI be involved?
Yes, well, as you were describing, we pride ourselves to really having relationships with multiple artists. First of all, we're trying to establish long-term relationships with them. I think also, as I already mentioned, it's also about credibility between the brands, the musicians, and the consumers. There needs to be this authentic connection that I was mentioning between the three. And I think that is what guides the collaboration with artists that really have a natural connection and affinity with our brand. When we think in AI, I think it's about how do we use technology to really drive a benefit either for consumers or for the artists. In our case, for example, we have been using technology in general to unlock some of the barriers that artists can face when trying to, become relevant. Like this is more for up-and-coming artists. We have been using technology to unlock time in studio for them. We have been using technology also to ensure that we have better distribution of the music that they are developing. And most recently, we have used AI with Boy Wonder to ensure that we support emerging artists to connect with a very well-known producer and, ensure that we amplify the power of this producer via the technology. So I think when you use technology in the benefit of the artist, in the benefit of the consumer, and the benefit of the music, I think there's a lot of power and there's a lot that you can generate. And we will continue to explore different alternatives in the future, and to again ensure that we unlock as many as possible barriers that are really limiting some of the development of the new artists.
Amazing. It's so cool what you guys are doing for emerging artists, and I think it's so beautiful when companies help these up and coming artists, even though there is not necessarily the cloud that they are bringing in terms of huge amount of fans or something like that, but actually you like them and they fit your brand and you guys want to support them for the long run. It's simply beautiful.
Correct, because it doesn't end by, let's say I got time for the studio and then you create your record or you record your song and that ends. We use all our experiences as well to give them, for example, time in stages to appear in some of our advertising, etc. So we try to continue that development, to ensure that they have as much possibilities as possible to develop their music.
Cool. Graham, you have now been an executive. You've been working in the industry for 14 years, and you're now executive creative director. How can alcohol brands marry the unique visual identity with an equally impressive sonic identity? And have you noticed any recent upticks in brand projects trying to unite the visual and the sound design? And
go for it. And
almost about to finish. On the design front, like what might the alcohol sector be able to learn from other industries that you have noticed?
Yeah, big three-pronged question. I think so look, the logo, the visual can be a very prolific starting point, but we also have to be cognizant a lot of the brands we're talking about in this space have been around for a long time. So we want some sense of connection and we want some sense of association. But really, when we're looking at a brand, looking what's sacred to it, looking at its purpose, its beliefs, what it wants to stand for, there's a whole range of different cues you can take in order to create something memorable for sonic purposes. So the visual is a great starting point, but I think we have to work a bit harder than just kind of putting sound to what we see and start to take greater inspiration from some of the things we talked about so far, the ownable product rituals. Maybe there's particular packaging experiences that are really synonymous with that brand or that product experience that we can leverage to create a moment that people remember. I think we also have to, moving forward into the full 360 world of a brand ecosystem, really think about where the most memorable moments are. And actually, we talk a lot in the studio about the invisible assets. So moving away from just the visual and the color codes and that recognition, but into some of the things that really reassure. So think about the interaction behaviors, the motion behaviors that brands now have to have. The way in which you're reassured when you pay for something in the digital finance world is a very memorable signature because it unites tactility and sonic. So I think as we start to build more and more sonic languages from scratch and brand themes, we need to make sure they're aligned to the spirit of the brand, its purpose and what it wants to resonate, and then follow that customer all the way through the journey and make sure that there's synergy there. So, your final kind of question about where the alcohol sector could learn, I really do think that it is in some of the spaces we've already talked about, some of those ubiquitous areas of finance, of tech. We know the Apple dong as the computer opens, the Intel inside. We still have clients in this moment in time referencing those things from now decades ago, which I think shows you the power of not only creating something ownable based on the product experience, but also using that, really diligently and repetitively in the right moments all the way through the journey and over a long period of time. So it feels like there's an upswell in people wanting this. I think, worlds of, as you talked about, Roberto, worlds of social media, worlds of bombardment, of lots of visual stimulation, of lots of sonic stimulation, really means there's a bigger demand for a memorable theme and signature for any brand. I just think you've got to be careful that you don't just base it on the visual and you base it off of what's really ownable to the product.
Absolutely. And I think to add to that, I think it's also so important that it's flexible, because now brands are on all these different social media platforms, on TV, maybe even have their apps. So back in the day, like from books and talking to my colleagues who have been in this industry longer than I have, back in the 2000s, the idea of sonic branding was just having one track, and that was meant for everything. And you're like, that doesn't work, because brand isn't so monotonous in their storytelling. Like they need this flexibility to have different types of storytelling depending on the emotions and so on. So I think a lot of people who are put back in the day put off from sonic branding because they were like, this limits creativity. But now, especially with AI, I think the flexibility can be there, and you can much more easily create on demand a lot of different types of music for different types of storytelling.
And I think we have to remember that it is beyond music at times as well. Yeah. The voices we use, the little moments that we signify with music are just as important as recall through actual tracks.
Yeah, think about Netflix, right? We all know that chime that you hear for Netflix, what's to come. You're going to go on a great journey. There's a great story to come. You're going to relax and maybe watch too many episodes of something. So it's a nice like kickoff sound to start your mindset and to put you in a place immediately.
And I will, if I may, I will also add that at the end, as you were saying, it's not only about one song or one sonic melody, it's about a framework that can give the flexibility to adapt to the different channels, to tap into those occasions. Because if not also, and particularly in this industry, it gets boring. Like hearing the same song, it really doesn't make any sense. So it's an industry that is about fun. So we need to be very careful about that as well.
Absolutely. April, you are now well versatile in experiential marketing and having the background from Beam Suntory. What role does sound play in live branded events? And it's gonna be a two-pronged question.
Okay.
How can alcohol brands work to improve sonic experiences for consumers?
Okay, so I think sound is absolutely critical in live experiences. You have the wrong soundtrack playing, you have it too loud, you have it too quiet, it throws the whole mood, right? That needs to be as heavily curated and as thoughtfully timed and placed as anything else that you do when you're creating a moment. We know that sound connects you, it transports you. It also gives people, groups, a sense of belonging, right? There's something they can all rally around. So I think it's really important to think about that as you would the run of show, or as you would the lighting, or the food that you're serving, or the drinks you're serving. It's very, very important. There's I don't know if anybody's been to a Japanese style listening room where you can really, the beauty of sound and drink comes together so viscerally, and you just sit very quietly and listen to an entire album, and even if it's one that you've heard 100 times, it sounds so different because of that moment and because of that sort of attention that you're giving it at that time. And then with that connection with the occasion and the cocktail it's just perfect. So I think we're going to see more of that music taking you on a journey, similar to what like a live DJ would do. They're the masters at that, right? Changing it up to inspire a mood with the group, right? You can't just put something on, leave it on, and let it go. You need to be curating that through social listening, through the active awareness of how the energy has changed, if you need it to come up, if you need to come down. Someone that's really, really in tune with that, like a live DJ, would be able to do that very well, and they'll be able to make those shifts and change that mood and attention. I think also you really need to consider investing in that sound experience to round out, a sensorial experience. It needs to all work together very, very thoughtfully. And that can't just be an afterthought. That needs to be something that's considered right from the start for live experiences.
Couldn't agree more. And here's a question for all of you. So feel free to chime in, whoever raises their hand up the fastest. How can brands within the sector utilize sound as well as different forms of, the multisensory marketing, taste, smells, and specifically in like live events to help them differentiate themselves from, the sea of brightly colored bottles and cans and to a certain extent, very similar products? Are brands underestimating the power of live experiences in triggering consumer memories and emotions? Because a lot of brands, do sponsorships, but I personally believe that more could be done. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, at Legacy, like our motto, our tagline is that experience is everything. There's great stuff you could do above the line. There's great stuff you could do with content, but really to create that moment of transformation with a consumer, those live moments. And it doesn't always need to be a big party. It could be something quite small, very intimate, even just your experience with a brand at a bar. That's a live experience. That's where decisions are made. And that's where brands, particularly alcohol brands, go from just another bottle on the shelf to something that becomes part of your your lifestyle, part of your identity, part of your own inventory, right? That you lead with. So thinking about how to curate those moments and make them, bring in more senses to them, helps us as humans to connect deeper with them. It goes beyond just what the bottle looks like. It goes beyond just the taste of the drink. It brings it all together in a bigger way.
I think people sorry, you go, Roberto.
No, please go, Graham.
I think people want to contribute as well. You touched earlier, April, on kind of, some of that Gen Z mindset and the surrounding sort of demographics we talk about. People are wanting an invitation to co-create, to make that moment together, not just to have it kind of broadcast at them. And I think that those live moments, those experiential moments, whether that be behind the scenes, almost talking about the provenance and the ingredients and why this product is so special, or at the other side in why it will be such an additive part of a greater experience, is really important. It's the cultural currency that people will talk about afterwards, that will live on social media, that will become dinner party conversations, that will be, again, as you say, will influence the next decision at the next bar that you're in. So I do think that it's about making it more of an invitation in that context.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're living in a very unique situation right now, because on one hand, I think humans are being bombarded with technology more than ever. The influence of different technologies are really driving accelerated change. But on the other hand, we have a reevaluation of what really matters. So consumers are really they are really leveraging the power of the human touch, of the human connection. And actually, when you ask consumers what would they value more, like a gift or an experience, 70% would say an experience.
Absolutely.
So I think that makes a huge difference. And that's why I think connecting with them in those experiences is key. Live events are really important, and these probably are the perfect moment to connect with our consumers. And that helps us to provide a great liquid to lips experience that could be memorable. So then it's really connecting with the different senses, which we know at this level is super important. And for example, we develop like a full circuit of music festivals where we bring to life what we call Casa Bacardí, which is actually our home in Puerto Rico, where we produce our rum. And that experience is really being memorable for the consumers, because the footprint that we build at each point brings different elements of our brand, the Caribbean, and allows them to live that feeling of escapism that Bacardi can offer to them. So this is somehow a home away from home in the different places that we activated.
That's amazing. This also made me think of experience that Shivas did a couple of years ago. I don't know if you know this, but research shows that you can change basically taste of a product with sound. And they did a whiskey tasting where they were playing, deep brass notes, so that would make the liquid more bitter. You can also make it more spicy. So there's also ways to play with not only one sensory, but actually combine them, and you can have a totally different experience. I think that's kind of amazing that when you think about it, that you hear something and all of a sudden a thing becomes more bitter or more sweet. It's power of music.
Tastings, it's a real thing, and it really does influence how you are, your perception of what you're experiencing in that moment, whether it's food or drink or whatever. Having that sound added to it just changes the whole interpretation for you. One thing we were talking about earlier was the idea of sound healing. Like I do a lot of, we were talking about that. We are in sound baths and gong baths and things. And just that visceral physical reaction that you can have from sound that's perfectly chosen and intentional and curated for you. It's a little mind-boggling that you could feel so different just from different tones being played in your ears or around you. And I think bringing some of that mindset into a tasting experience or a distillery experience really is provocative and really can change the whole consumption experience for our audience.
Totally. And to all the viewers out there, if you haven't tried a sound bath, you should definitely try it. It is a phenomenal experience. And who knows, maybe it gets even better if you're sipping on a cocktail.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Meditation and cocktails.
Yeah.
There you go.
And, you know, one thing that a former boss and one of my mentors used to say is just think on the probably most scary scene of a terror movie. And can you imagine seeing that scene without sound? That really changes everything.
Yeah.
So I think that exemplifies how really sound and music in general it really evokes emotions that are important to connect with the different visual cues that we're experiencing.
Which is then kind of unfortunate that often music is seen as an afterthought. That is simply the case because
Right.
the visual is the first and most important for many, but I think that is changing.
Yeah. I mean, Bjorn, you called it in one of the quotes I saw, sonic ambience. And I think we talk about ambience, we talk about lighting, we talk about the tablescape or whatever, the visual aesthetic, but we don't think about that sonic ambience. And that is as important, as critical to set the tone, elevate when you need, change the mood, and connect with people, even back to like a yoga class, going from the beginning and then leading up to sort of this apex moment and then coming back down for the slow. You need to have that curated to take your audience on that journey, right? It's the same at a live experience.
Absolutely. And it's time for the last question before we get questions from the viewers. Is there one takeaway you'd like to leave viewers with surrounding the alcohol industry and the audio's role in the marketing mix for these brands? Roberto, if you would go first.
Absolutely. I would say, and we have been commenting this during the different questions, I think audio remains a primary media component across all the different markets and how do we connect with consumers, particularly when brands want to recruit. In fact, actually, when you look at the data, 90% of Gen Z stream music and podcasts daily. We cannot leave that opportunity on the table. Audio also continues to deliver more reach, trustworthiness, and most importantly, as I mentioned, memorability. So audio-based media or music is really helping us to provide people with a visceral and emotional connection. And as we already said, it can instantly transport you into a new state of mind and a feeling of genuine affinity towards any of the brands.
So true. Graham, how about you?
I mean, that's a prolific answer. I think for me, what is most creatively inspiring about this topic is just how analog and human and instant it is in a world of such technological advances. I kind of feel like this industry in particular needs to, each brand needs to find its sound and take that sound to the audience and start to collaborate and co-create with them. And they will very quickly see that upswell of affiliation and admiration very quickly. And from a creative perspective, we should be thinking about this upfront to underline Roberto's point. This isn't an afterthought. This isn't a now we've done all of these things and built the campaign and made the brand. Let's think about what it sounds like. It can be the way in as well. We often work, sonic and motion first, and it's a very inspiring way to do things. So yeah, I think there's a huge well of inspiration waiting to be tapped.
Absolutely. It is the highway to our emotions, and I think sound is uniquely has the unique opportunity also to be shared on social media with the users. So before you know it, it could become a sonic meme. How about you, April?
Yeah, I mean, to Graham's point, as creatives, we have to make the choice to be fearless and move forward, defying like the expectation, right? We can't just in sound is the same thing. We can't just go for the obvious. We can't just take the thing that we think, oh, everybody's going to like this one, it's harmless. We sometimes need to take that step into a little bit more of an uncomfortable space to really define ourselves and to stand out and to differentiate and to give our consumers an experience that becomes memorable and unexpected and beyond, right? We can't just do this is what everybody likes all the time. You need to kind of, be okay with going beyond that a little bit. The beauty of alcohol, the alcohol moment or the drinks occasion, or spirits in general, and sound, is that alcohol really just naturally opens. It's an opener, it's a connector. It makes us open to new experiences, breaks down barriers, and then sound comes in and just deepens that experience, right? So we have this natural place of openness and receptivity, and then sound comes in and just really fills in the space there and just can take it to a whole new level. So again, thinking about how those things work from the beginning and the power of that, and not just thinking of it as let's just throw something on that is going to not bother anybody. We want to go deep. We want to go big. And we want to go beyond the expectation.
I love what you said, music and sound can deepen an experience. And I think that is my takeaway from this amazing chat that we have here. And how about we go for some questions from the viewers? Are we excited? Yes, let's dive in. So here we have from Gabriela Nicole Farms. Do you feel sonic branding will be more impactful within certain spirit categories over others? Tequila, whiskey, and why? She's thinking of the partnership with Rasa, Ballantyne's, Brittany Howard, and Johnny Walker, etc. Anyone, jump in.
I'll jump in. I don't think it will be more impactful. I think all of these, any category, it's the same idea of this intimate moment of consumption. You need to be flexible. You can't just always be playing, jazz music all the time, because then you're going to miss your moments of, these turn it up moments, these sort of more energized moments, these other areas. So I think it's always impactful across all spirit categories. I think as long as you remain flexible and have breadth that we were speaking to before, making sure that there is openness so that there's a right song or a right sound for each occasion within your repertoire.
Absolutely. And to add to this, I think now, so I used to be a bartender. I used to run a bar in London.
Awesome.
And I think, back in the day, there were kind of spirit stereotypes. Some people were meant to drink beer because that was, manly, while pink cocktails were not allowed for men.
Yeah.
That is thankfully vanishing.
Long gone.
And with music, it can, tap into all these different people that are, listening to different music, but still want to have a cocktail or a beer or, something nice on the rocks. So next question. Anisha Shetty. In 2023, the global market for no and low alcoholic drinks were valued at $23 billion. How do you see this subsector impacting the wider industry, and how might the non-alcoholic brands sound? Graham.
My gut reaction is that I think they should own their sound just like any alcoholic beverage will own its sound. I don't think the amount of alcohol contained in the drink, it means that sonic is more or less appropriate, or that we should sound different. I think they have to own the moment that they're consumed. They have to really appeal and invite the audience in, like we've talked about, deepen the experience. And I think that can come in all walks of life. There's, lots of other categories outside of alcohol that are showing that works as well. So I don't think that necessarily we have to think differently about those brands at this stage. And I think changing tastes and habits will probably see that $23 billion increase as well over time, and see, a lot of the brands who have been very strongly affiliated with alcohol content have to broaden their reach and remit and think about alternatives. So, for instance, with Bacardí, what does the sound of alcoholic Bacardí versus non-alcoholic Bacardí sound like? Well, should it sound different? Probably
Right.
not, in my mind.
I think you're totally right. I think it shouldn't sound different, because then you would also alienate potential, because people that are drinking non-alcoholic Bacardí, they still want to party.
Correct.
Right. And it's a very seamless experience when you're at a lot of like more modern, like contemporary drinking establishments or restaurants. The non-alcoholic cocktails and the alcohol cocktails are on the menu, and they both look lovely, and they're both very crafted and thoughtfully curated, and it's a blend of flavor. To me, this will be a seamless integration, and that you won't see a lot of differentiation between the two in how they move. It's just it's a personal choice, and you may be going back and forth between an alcohol filled cocktail and a non-alcoholic in the same night. And that's, one of those things. It's just this like kind of seamless, smooth transition.
Absolutely. And usually the need state that you want to tap into is belonging. So at the end, because you can have the restrictions, or you can restrict yourself for any reason, but at the end, belonging, and therefore there's no reason of being differentiated between non-alcoholic and alcoholic ways to connect with music.
I agree.
Totally agree. But one thing I want to mention here, because no and low alcohol drinks are growing, and it's a kind of a boom. I'm sure you all remember the hard seltzer bubble. Well, bubble or a boom, who knows? But when we were doing the analyzing of the brand, what was staggering to us is that the hard seltzer brands, overall, I think around 25% of all their videos didn't include any music, which was shocking to me. Because maybe it's because, well, I was wondering if they were doing it on purpose, or what might have been the reason for it. I don't know the answer to this, but something for the no and low alcohol things to think about is make sure that you aren't at least silent.
Yeah, or leaning so heavy into that can cracking sound that's all people walk away with that refreshment cue in their brains. But yeah, that's a bit surprising that it would be so low.
Yeah,
I will say that I will expect that to be a conscious decision, because at the end, sound, silence, noise, etc., play a role, as long as you have a purpose for that. But as April was mentioning, if this is like an afterthought and it was just something that they miss, then that's a big problem.
Yes. So I hope Anisha was happy with those answers, but on to the next one. From Shachi, how does one decide to build a brand trajectory between maintaining legacy and new age trends? For example, Glenfiddich is rooted in legacy, and Bacardí is a more fresh take in terms of marketing, in terms of audio and music as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge to be posed with as a creative. How do you take a brand that is rooted in heritage and rooted in legacy, like a Scotch, but make that meaningful in a modern way? It's about taking this historic story, but not just staying there, because you still want to show that it's contemporary and modern, and it has a space and place in a modern lifestyle. So yeah, this is definitely a challenge that I'm sure we've all come to. I don't know, Roberto, do you have a thought, since Bacardí was mentioned in here?
Yes, for sure. And when you think of Bacardí, I think Bacardí, as I was mentioning at the beginning, is like 162 years old. When you look, it's a family-owned company. So there's a lot of that heritage, authenticity, craftsmanship that is part of our DNA. In the case of Bacardí, we call it a DNA that is built in two extremes, one which is integrity, and the other one which is expressiveness. When you look at integrity, it's precisely all those reasons to believe that allow us to have the credentials to build a good product and an equity, etc. And the expressiveness is the fun side of rum. So the beauty of Bacardí is that we are the only brand in the industry that can play with both extremes, because we have that heritage and that expressive side as well. So it's about how do we use the reasons to believe to build the equity, but also we develop relevant programming, relevant associations to really embed the brand into the culture of consumers. And music is our point of entrance. Music is the pillar that really helps us to really what we are calling the recruit the next generation of rum consumers. And so that's probably the mix and the balance. And as Bjorn was mentioning, like people right now are looking for brands that have a deeper purpose, that have some credibility. So it's a perfect mix.
Yeah, I think a good example recently of a brand really taking kind of a big step in that direction, Bowmore, which is a Scotch that's hundreds of years old, very rooted in its like historic heritage on Islay. They recently partnered with a very young female composer, Hanya Ranai, and did a beautiful content series where she created basically the sound of Scotch and the sound of Islay and captured it in a just really lovely piano piece that she did. And, tying that to the liquid and tying that to that heritage story, but having this very, very young contemporary approach. It was a really stunning juxtaposition of those two worlds done very successfully.
Yes.
I think that this kind of tension as well, like history and legacy and heritage doesn't have to be boring or not fit for a future audience. Actually, in the world that we're in, think of those brands that have existed 100, 150 years, 200 years, they're one of a kind. And a lot of the work we do when we're thinking about evolution or even revolution of these brands is finding that DNA you talked about, Roberta, what's really core, and thinking about how we take that to new and interested and maybe uninterested audiences as well. So we're seeing a lot of brands have over that history gathered a lot of dust and paraphernalia and other things. And a big part of our job is kind of shaking that down and going, this is what you stand for. You've always stood for this. And that's actually really relevant now as well. And so how we go and meet that audience starts to become much more fertile in terms of what we can creatively do.
Exactly.
Yeah, here's like a modern translation of your story. It's not changing it. It's taking that and just bringing it into a new narrative.
Exactly. I think, for example, with Glenfiddich, Sonic is in a unique position of kind of merging the legacy and new age trends. I'm thinking just, bagpipes and hip hop, like Glenfiddich, make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see a track with bagpipes, and whiskey, and nice lyrics.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go on to the last question. I think it's the last question. Referring to engaging consumers through meme sounds. This is a great way to gain initial awareness of Sonic logos and engage consumers, especially Gen Z. But how do brands avoid this altering brand perception negatively? What if this gave some alcohol brands a childlike identity through sound? It's a hard question. Who wants to go first? It's a biggie.
I think so many industries have to behave responsibly across the board. So it's got to be something that is taken very seriously. And when I think of some of the very sticky mnemonics that we've seen maybe emerge in some of the fast food world, the same argument could be aimed at that as well. But I still love them, and they still surprise me when they come on TV. So I think whatever we create in categories like this has to be responsible, has to be very purposefully aimed at the right target audience and the right demographics. And in reality, when we're talking about lots of very long-established brands, needs to come across with some cachet and kudos and I suppose experience in that world as well. So I think it would be a very poor form if alcohol brands of any type started to kind of pursue that stickiness above and beyond the responsibility that they have to carry.
Yeah, I agree. I think as creatives in the spirits sector, we're constantly evaluating how to move forward with responsibly and with integrity in our concepts, in our storytelling, in our approach, so that we're not and not even just about compliance, but about just like the right thing to do. And I think that's an important thing that when you're in this industry for, as long as we've been, that you really take that to heart and assess things that way. I also think that there is a risk of, you want to be timely and you want to be contemporary, but I think there is a degradation to your brand when you're just jumping on every single trend and thing that's happening. Some brands can do that, like a more of a whimsical, maybe a restaurant chain. You could do that. You could get there. It's more family centered. But when you're talking about something that's got sort of a storied history to it, you got to find the balance between those things so that you're not just jumping on every a trend that's going to be around for, a week.
Yeah,
Totally.
and a couple of thoughts. One, definitely we control everything that we can control to ensure responsible consumption. But I think it doesn't stop there. At the end, it's also about the content that we create, as Graham was describing, but also the channels that we use.
Yep.
When we look at the channels that we use, we need to comply with certain rules to ensure that the majority of the audience, a significant majority of the audience, is within our LDAs and above, because we don't want to take any risk. We actually, internally and particularly Bacardí, we exaggerate on those rules to ensure that we, again, control and drive as much as possible the responsible consumption, which is the ones that are going to benefit the most of that is us. We don't want, we want things to, being played in the right side. And on the other hand, I think there's always a risk when there's content creation driven by either consumers or by third parties. But again, at the end, it's our responsibility to ensure that we stop those when they occur before getting amplified, and that we really monitor all of our different channels to avoid any potential risk or disruption to what we have been saying. So I think it's important not only the content, the consumption, but also the channels that we're using.
Absolutely. Being considerate of time, I think we have time for 2 more questions. So let's dive in. Second to last, Jody Krankel. What kind of sound can be put into use when you're trying to entice a consumer in the store? Directional audio, displays, audio played inside the store itself. And have you tried any of these, and how successful have they been? I'm immediately thinking of a study that was done where there was French music versus German music played, and how actually there was a upsell in the French wine when people were playing French music, and then vice versa when the German music was played. And when people were asked why they were picking a German wine, because most people don't pick German wine so often, they had no clue. They just said, "Oh, I like the look of the bottle," or whatever. Wow. But definitely music had something to do with it. But what do you guys think?
I may say that it depends on what you want to achieve. I think definitely, as we have been saying, music plays a great role in connecting with the consumers. So the tool that you're going to use or how you do it will depend on what you want to achieve. You want to increase your sales, you want to increase the connection, you want to communicate a program, etc. I think one of the rules of thumb, at least for me, is ensure that you have an identity that is not a random sound or random noise, that you have an identity and that you have consistency. At the end, usually marketeers, we tend to get tired very easily of what we're doing, because even an advertising, a song or whatever, we see it probably 200 times before any consumer says it. Yeah. So I think we need to stick to really what is relevant for the consumers and be consistent in the way we amplify it.
Totally. I think the context of the store, you have to think about how the sensors interplay together and what the role of the physical, the visual, and potentially the sonic will do. We're big fans of lots of experiments we've done where the sound is interactive. Your presence will create it, rather than, again, just having something ambient or in the background. So I think where you can make the sort of action become memorable, it can have long-lasting effects.
Absolutely. And what Roberto was saying about consistency, like when it comes to sonic branding, like it is a marathon, not a sprint, because it's going to take so much longer to build up those memory structures compared to a visual, because it just, not everyone has a perfect pitch or is a musician, so it just takes a little bit more time. But most brands can get there if they are consistent. And on that note, I think we don't have time for another question. So thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you found it insightful. I know that I found it fascinating conversation, and I hope you did as well. Thank you, Roberto, Graham, and April. Really appreciate it. And have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
everyone.